Hello, welcome one, welcome all to this. It's Season 10, Episode 20 of the Ubuntu podcast. In this episode, we're going to review the Dell Precision 5520. We'll also have some command line lurve, and we'll go over your feedback. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Martin.
Hello.
And Alan.
Yo.
What up, homie?
Yes.
Martin, what have you been doing?
Well, unlike Alan, I have not been to young person school. I have, in fact, been on holiday on the Isle of Wight for a few days.
Oh, nice.
Excellent. How was that?
It was sunny and lovely. Yeah, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. In fact, all of us really did. It's great.
Excellent. Alan, how about you?
So I joked, I think maybe last episode, that I put the Mycroft away and I don't expect I'll see my Mycroft, my proper Mycroft, anytime soon. And it arrived this week.
Oh, wow.
So,
Just to prove you wrong.
Yeah. Well, arrived last week, technically. So yeah, it was interesting because I wasn't expecting it, and then suddenly I got a note through the door that said you've got some customs fees to pay at the post office. So I had to trot down to the post office and pay them.
Good.
Pay them some more money.
Always a good first impression.
Yes. Well, it came from America. I was kind of expecting it. And I got it home, and once I finished work, I unpacked it, and it's the finish on it is quite nice. I think we'll do maybe a full review at another time, but the finish on the case is quite nice. It's a nice little piece of it's quite big, actually.
For those not familiar with the Mycroft, what does it look like?
Yeah. I'm not sure there's anything. It looks like an alien spaceship with two round eyes on the front and a little matrix display. And
What's it sound like?
Well, oh dear me. Hey, Mycroft, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? While he's thinking about that, there's a little wobbly line on the display where it goes.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck?
There he goes.
Could chuck wood. Much a woodchuck would chuck all the wood he could chuck if a woodchuck
Now-
could chuck wood. According to the tongue twister.
Okay.
He likes to talk, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Can you make him stop now?
I can turn him down.
Oh, you can
There
turn
we
him
go.
down. Okay.
So the button on the top is both a trigger button, but it's also a volume. You can turn it and turn him down, up and down. It's pretty good. I cracked it open and had a look inside, and it's all very tidy inside. It's okay. I had a bit of fun with it, and I asked it some stupid questions and made a couple of amusing videos, and it went rambling on forever. It's worth pointing out that there is a card in the box that says, this is pre-release hardware. If that's not your thing, put me back on a box and get me off the shelf again in February 2018, when there'll be a software update that will probably make this okay again. So that was a bit weird and a bit disconcerting. I thought it might. I realise this is Mark 1 and it's the early preview and all this kind of stuff, but in fact the box has a sticker on it that says Advanced Prototype. So yeah, it's early days. But I played with it a little bit, and it's quite funny, a bit quirky. The setup
Useful?
The setup, I haven't found it at all useful yet, other than for entertainment value and increasing my YouTube subscribers when I put stupid videos up. That's the only use I've had for it so far. But there's some interesting quirks about it. It's got an Ethernet port, and it's exposed the USB ports of a Raspberry Pi inside, so you can just plug a keyboard and HDMI display in, and start poking around at it. And I've noticed that it does things like updates itself overnight and all that kind of stuff. And the setup process is pretty straightforward. But yeah, it's got a way to go. But I'm glad I've got one and I can have a play with it.
Cool.
So about 3 months ago, we reviewed a Dell XPS laptop, and a little while after that, Bart and George from Dell got in contact and said, "Hey, would you like to review another laptop?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great, but how about someone else does it?" So I threw it at Mark, and Mark has reviewed the laptop.
I feel I should let Dell know we haven't been actually throwing their laptops around.
Of course, not much. So what did you get, Mark? And tell us all about it.
Right, so I got the Dell Precision 5520, which is a 15-inch mobile workstation type laptop.
Oh, that sounds heavy.
It's actually surprisingly not. I think it only weighs about 2 kilograms. It wasn't like noticeably heavier than my Ultrabook.
Right.
Like in terms of, I didn't pick it up and think, I couldn't carry this around or anything like that. So it's probably, if you're just trying to think about the class of machine, it's probably like a MacBook Pro kind of replacement sort of device. So in the box, it came with fairly simple. You got the power supply, which is a sort of a flat brick and a UK plug. It has a Thunderbolt to Thunderbolt to Ethernet adapter, and the laptop itself, which came in a smaller, like nice padded box, which was quite nicely presented inside. And that's all you got in the box, basically.
Okay, so you get an adapter now. That's nice.
Yes. Yeah. So it doesn't have the ports on the side. It doesn't have an Ethernet port. It's got 2 USB-A ports. It's got a USB-C/Thunderbolt port. The charging port, although I believe it can also charge through the Thunderbolt port. It's got a combined mic and headphone jack, and it's got an SD card slot. So it's not brimming with ports, but you can also get Thunderbolt dock as well as an additional option.
And what screen did they send you?
Right, so basically they sent me the completely tripped out spec of this machine. So this has got a it is a Ultra HD, so that's 3840 by 2160, 15.6 inch touchscreen display.
Ooh, is it glossy?
Wow.
It is. Yes, it's glossy, but it's also extremely bright. So you can read it in direct sunlight as long as you're reading it on a light background. If it's got a dark background, it's very sort of like a mirror. But if it's got a white background and you've got the brightness up, you can read it perfectly. Cool. Okay. So that's good. So this is actually my first experience with a high DPI display. So that's been an interesting adventure.
How did you find that?
Right. So on first boot, it goes through the OEM setup and everything, and that's all fine and adjusted to the right resolution. That's fairly normal. You go through. The additional thing it has in the Ubiquity setup is it offers to create a recovery USB stick.
Right.
And that's like an extra Dell screen in that setup process, and then it does the normal stuff. Then it reboots. You land on Light DM, which it then adjusts to the right DPI. You then log into Unity, and it's not in the right DPI. You've got to find the setting and change the UI scale.
To scale it up.
Yeah.
Is everything really tiny when you first boot it?
Yes,
Right.
exactly. So I set it to 2 times scale, which basically gives the screen the same amount of screen estate as it would do if it was 1080p.
Right.
It's just that everything basically pixel doubled in both directions. So in terms of how it works with the apps and stuff, it's generally okay. It comes, well, the web browser's fine. It's basically if you start going into some of the other apps, like installing other apps, if you install Steam, that's not scaling properly unless you use big picture mode. I've got Mumble open at the moment, which doesn't look particularly good, but then Audio Recorder is fine. One thing I will say about the apps is that it comes with Chrome and Chromium installed, and they're both at the top of the launcher next to each other. But it also has the QML browser, which comes with which was from Ubuntu Touch.
Yeah.
And that doesn't pick up the UI scaling, which is a shame. So if you click the Amazon icon in the dash, that launches with the QML browser, but it's really tiny. Whereas Chrome and Chromium are just fine with that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the other hardware, it came with a quad-core Xeon processor. So it's quite a beast. A Xeon in a laptop, yes. So any of our listeners who are familiar with Hugo's random benchmark, it trounced all of the scores on the current wiki page for that.
Okay.
Yes. 32 gigs of RAM, a Wi-Fi, Intel Wi-Fi and Bluetooth card, 512 gig SSD. It's got an NVIDIA Quadro M1200 GPU with 4 gig of dedicated memory.
What's one of those?
A nice video card.
Yeah.
Okay.
A fairly nice video card.
Mobile. Not as nice as your special newfangled external thing, but nice for a laptop.
I mean, how does that compare to the M series NVIDIA things? Is that equivalent to something like a 1050 or a 1060?
Well, it seems to be able to do similar sorts of things to my 1050 Ti on my Steam box.
Comparison.
I did a bit of benchmarking in Tomb Raider's got a benchmark, and it seemed to perform quite well with that. What I would say is it can do 1080 okay. It can't do full resolution on a proper 3D game. I managed to do Tabletop Simulator, which is a fairly rudimentary 3D graphics. It was fine with at full resolution, but no, if you're actually playing a full 3D run around and do things game, then you're looking at lowering the resolution. Also, when you're using something graphically demanding, the fan is definitely on.
So as in like it's audible and noisy over and above the sound of whatever you're listening to?
Yeah, it's very much noticeable that the fan is on and blowing quite loudly.
Okay.
It's not annoying, it's quite a sort of a low pitch. There's no sort of whining, but it's...
Is that only did you notice the fan spin up when you're doing any day-to-day non-gamey stuff?
No, not really. I'm not sure. It might have done it if I was watching like 4K video. Basically, anything which is, taxing the GPU or using the GPU specifically, you notice it then. But just day-to-day usage, it might be there, but it's quiet, and anything else you're doing will drown it out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What about the build quality? What does it feel like?
Very solid, I have to say. It's sort of metal finish on the outside. I think around the keyboard it looks kind of like carbon fiber. I'm not sure exactly.
Right.
I think that's what they say it is, yeah. It's got a soft touch as well, hasn't it?
It does. And especially on the touchpad. The touchpad is like really silky, but also really solid and responsive and has just the right amount of friction. One really nice detail about it is on the bottom, where you normally have like the serial number and all the various logos it needs. It has a little metal plate with the model number etched into it, and then you flip that up, and underneath it's hidden everything under there.
Yeah, I quite like that. I had that on the
Yeah.
XPS 13. That's quite nice.
Yeah.
Are there any other ports on the bottom that you could get at the RAM and stuff like that, or does it look pretty sealed?
No, everything is screwed in with Torx screws, and I haven't had the time to undo it and see what you can get at inside yet.
Right. Well, I can interject there. If you take the bottom plate off, you can get at the SODIMM RAM slots, and you can get at the M2 SSD.
Oh, great.
Nice. What about using it on a daily basis? What does it feel like when you're using it?
Really good, actually. I've used it to work from home for a couple of days, and I've basically just been using it as my laptop for the week and a half since I've got it.
Is it what you are using right now?
It is what I'm using right now, in fact. And yeah, it's the only sort of the first issue I had was the Windows key is disabled, which was the same problem that Alan had with the I should say the super key, with the same problem Alan had on the XPS 13, where you have to uninstall a package and then twiddle some settings to get it working. The particular thing that I noticed is on first boot, when it displays the Unity shortcuts, everything which should have the super key is just missing from that list. So if you hadn't used Unity before, you wouldn't actually know that there's all of these shortcuts available to you.
Oh, they've modified the image, have they?
No. That is picked up from the settings. Once you set it in Comp's Config Settings Manager, it tells you, based on your settings in there, which key to press for all the shortcuts.
Right.
So once you enable it, if you then hold down the key, it will come up and have all the shortcuts on there.
Right.
But unless you know to go looking to do that, you've just got a dead key on your keyboard.
Right.
That said, I think it is fair to call it the Windows key because it does have a Windows logo on it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Although this is a device pre-installed with Ubuntu.
Yeah.
What about the battery life on this thing?
Right. So the model I've got came with a 6-cell 97 watt-hour battery.
Yowza.
Wow.
Yes. The base spec is a 3-cell 56 watt-hour battery. So
that's some upgrade.
Yeah. I did a bit of testing with it. So because it's got an NVIDIA GPU, you can tell it to use the Intel one or the NVIDIA one. So the first test I did was with the NVIDIA one, and the test was I booted it up, had it connected to Wi-Fi, the brightness turned down to its minimum setting, which is still perfectly usable on this screen, and I just left it to discharge. So with the NVIDIA GPU, it managed about 6.5 hours.
Wow.
With the Intel GPU, it managed about 11 hours.
Okay.
Although, I should say this wasn't while I was
doing nothing, right?
Doing nothing,
With
just
the screen
sitting
on.
there
Right,
with the
okay.
screen on and connected to Wi-Fi. I also tested the standby, so I left it on standby for 18 hours and the battery drained by 8%.
That's tidy.
Yeah. One thing I did notice, though, after doing these tests is while it's recharging, the sort of top left quadrant of the laptop, which is where the charger plugs in, does get very hot to the touch.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to leave your hand sitting there.
Any problems? Any other issues with the laptop that would make you frustrated?
I had a couple of issues with the ports. So I mentioned it's got the headphone jack. If I plug my stereo headphones, which I'm using right now, which are currently plugged into my USB mixer, if I plug them into the headphone jack and do the front left, front right test in the audio settings, the left channel is noticeably quieter, which is a bit strange. The other thing that I found is I've got a USB hub, which I have sitting on my desk with the things that I plug into my laptop when it's at my desk. And I had that plugged into one of the USB-A ports, and I found that devices kept dropping off it, which they don't do on my other laptop. So I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but I've tried just having them plugged into all of the ports directly, and they're fine.
Is it a USB 2 hub or a USB 3 hub?
It's a USB 2 hub, and it's plugged into a USB 3 port.
I have seen that myself on other laptops. I think it might be a kernel thing.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So how much was this? It sounds like you've got the absolute full tilt version.
Yes.
So how much is this version and
Yes. So this version, I think it retails for around £2,600.
Okay.
So this is, yeah.
So that's
when
the version with all the graphics and all the processors,
all the
and
graphics,
all the RAM,
processors,
and all the
all the
monitor.
When you said it's like a MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's that class of device and that
Wowzer.
price bracket. The base specification, so this is if you have a Core i5, 8 gig of RAM, 1080p non-touch screen, a regular spinning HDD, and the small battery comes in at around 1,600.
Right.
A regular spinning hard disk. Does it take those?
It does.
Does it?
Yes.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yes. You have the option of an HDD.
Oh, and you get the smaller battery if you do that, don't you? Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, I think that's how it works. If you have the hard drive bay, you get the smaller battery, and if you don't have the hard drive bay,
because there's options for the
there's
options for the M2 SSD or for a full size SSD.
Right.
Would you buy it?
Well, that's quite a complicated question because I don't think personally for me I would spend that much money on a laptop, any laptop.
Because you've got a Steam machine for playing games and your work doesn't require 3D rendering.
Yes.
Right.
But if my work required this class of machine and it was in this sort of budget, I would definitely look at this laptop. It is brilliant for that sort of stuff. Aside from, I have a few reservations about the way Ubuntu is set up on it. I think some of there's some sort of usability issues from that. So if I was recommending an Ubuntu laptop to someone, I would have a few reservations about that. But for me, knowing that I can just make all the tweaks I'd want to, I would. One thing I would probably say is I wouldn't bother with the Ultra HD touchscreen.
Right.
I would go with the Full HD non-touchscreen because I haven't found the touchscreen that useful or usable because it's only single touch, and really I don't think that the extra detail is worth the hassles of high DPI
and it's
at
not
the
a
moment.
flip around type of device
No.
that you could use as a tablet in a touch mode.
No.
Right.
Well, that's one thing I should say about the build quality. The hinge is really solid on the screen. You can't if you hold it and shake it up and down, it stays put.
Yeah, and I would
that.
just like to reiterate what you've said about the screen there. I've got previous generations of the XPS 13 and the XPS 15, both with the high DPI screens. And while they're lovely, and they're interesting devices to work with. The penalty in battery endurance is quite severe for those, and I would choose the 1080p equivalent just for the improved battery endurance. So if battery endurance is important to you, that's something to consider when you're speccing a machine like this out.
So when this episode goes out, your review will be on your blog, and we'll link to that in the show notes, right?
Yes, I've got quite a lot of detail about the various things I did and any issues I came across and what my overall verdict is.
Excellent.
Which, we'll publish them together.
So if you go to, when you hear this, if you go to ubuntupodcast.org, find this episode, you'll find a link to Mark's blog there. Brilliant. Thanks, Mark.
If you love the command line as much as we do, send us a command that will blow our minds, and we might even mention it on the show. Send your command line lurve to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it's time for a type of love. And the type of love this week is a command line love. And I found this thing. It's a program called USB Reset. And I found it because I've been using a USB device which seems to freak out every time you use it, and you need to reset it every so often. It's a Magewell HDMI USB capture device, so you can capture the HDMI output from another device, and it connects via USB 3 to your laptop, and you can capture using any kind of video for Linux thing like FFmpeg or whatever. But after using it, when you run it a second time, it spits out a bunch of errors. And I discovered that you can reset the USB device. I found an Ask Ubuntu article which has a piece of source code in the answer. And the answer to the question, how do I reset USB devices, is take this source code and compile it and then run it with sudo with these parameters.
Oh, good. That sounds safe.
And it works. It's brilliant. So I run it repeatedly all the time on my laptop now. So I've integrated it as part of my little script that I use to do video capture of HDMI, and the first thing I do is I just do an LSUSB to try and find the Magewell USB device, figure out what bus and device ID it is, because when you're on LSUSB it lists all the USB devices, and I only want to reset one of them. I don't want it to reset my keyboard and my mouse and all that kind of stuff, so I find the right one, run sudo USB reset with the bus ID and the device ID, it resets the device, and then the script that I run, FFmpeg, continues and runs perfectly. It's just brilliant.
Wonderful.
Also, thank you for lending me the Magewell device, Martin.
You're welcome.
There's always room for more feedback. On our website, each episode has its own comments, so post yours on ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it's time for all your wonderful feedback. First up, we've got an email from Gordon Campbell, who emailed us show@ubuntupodcast.org in reply to our discussion about the death of the Linux desktop.
Wow, what a long discussion about things which I completely ignore. Soon after installing Ubuntu on my 8-year-old, but with an SSD it flies, high-performance desktop, I add K3B and KRDC. I want the best of breed application, and I don't care how it was developed.
Interesting perspective. Jean emailed us.
I use a program called Dosage, which is a daily newspaper comic download page. Unfortunately, it does its update via a GitHub page. Is there an application that will go to this website and check for files that make up Dosage, have changed, and install them? Thanks, great show.
I think we might know the answer to this, might we, Martin?
I've got an inkling where this might be going.
Right. So it sounds like this is an application which could be worthy of a snap package, maybe.
I think it could be. Yeah,
Ding.
it's a Python application. So if there are any snap crafters out there, here's an application that needs a snap, apparently. And actually it's quite good because it supports all sorts of different comic sources from things like Calvin and Hobbes and all sorts. It's
really?
quite cool. Yeah, it's really very good, actually.
I've been looking for a comic reader. Did I mention this in a previous show? Because this is quite fortuitous. I've been looking for something to to read comics. So
this is not so much a comic reader, but a comic grabber.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
if that's what you're looking for, this is that thing.
I like online comics, and I like them and then forget them, and I never know where they are. So I need something like this. So that's brilliant. Please, someone could they snap this. Thank you very much. Also, John emailed us.
Please see this content at the Register, and it's an article about NHS Ubuntu and the nhsubuntu.org website. Perhaps you may even want to invite someone from the project onto the show.
Yes, this is an interesting project. It's a group who are taking Ubuntu and modifying it slightly and adding some NHS. I say NHS, like when you think of the NHS, the health service in the UK, it's lots of different groups and lots of different organisations, but they tailor it for some specific use cases within the NHS, like, for example, enabling the smart card reader, which is a must-have for identity purposes, security purposes, and they do things like that and make it a respin of it, which they've called NHS Ubuntu. They're doing interesting work. They're doing some pilots in a couple of places in the UK. And if you work within the NHS, or you know anyone who works within the NHS and is technically skilled, or maybe someone who works in the IT parts of the NHS, I'd recommend you put them in touch with the NHS Ubuntu.org people, because it's a fabulous little community project. And yeah, maybe we should get them on the show sometime.
Yes.
Oliver Leitner emailed us in.
The problem with Electron is it takes up a metric ton of RAM. That might not be a problem for you guys with your new high-end laptops, but we normals got a huge problem with that. If application XYZ is the only program I can have open before my workstation starts swapping, that is a problem. Example, Visual Studio Code. I cannot have it open for longer than a day because after that it breaks pretty much every other program I open into swap. Also, have you ever looked at how to compile Electron? Have a good look at the latest BSD Now show.
I know someone who's looked at compiling Electron applications, don't I, Martin?
Yeah, it's fine.
I completely empathise with his point about RAM, because
yes, that's a fair point.
And the single tweet that I've had the most, in inverted commas, engagement with is one where I bitched and moaned about how much RAM Slack takes up as an Electron app. So yeah, this is a feeling that a lot of people have, and actually we spoke to some Electron people and they are aware of this, and they do want to improve that stuff, but it's
and it is improving, and it's one of these things that will probably be a meme forever ever now.
Right.
But they are significantly reducing the amount of memory that Electron requires, specifically the JavaScript interpreter that's embedded into Electron.
Ken Fallon emailed us.
Hi Mark, your 20 lines of code does something that we at Hacker Public Radio have been wanting to do for years.
Wow.
As you know, we get all our shows from volunteers. On our upload form, some say the intro has been added and some do not. Unfortunately, these two do not match. Please can you share your code under a FLOSS license and put it somewhere? Seriously, this is the last thing stopping us automating the entire upload process.
Well, fancy that. Get you, Mark.
Yeah. Well, I actually solved a problem. So yes, I've stuck this in a gist on GitHub and I've added some comments. So yeah, I'm also happy to. I mean, it doesn't sound like as it is, it'll do exactly what HPR need it to do, but I'm happy to be got in touch with via our Telegram channel.
Yeah,
that's ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram, and I'm happy to help out in whatever sort of tweaks it needs, or in any way understanding it to help it do things.
And we'll have a link to that MIT licensed gist in the show notes, and Bad Martin is going to go back and edit the show notes for the live Mycroft Biscuits show, the Foss Talk live show, and add links to Mark's code and my code. And this is the point at which I realise I made something trivial and Mark made something that actually solves a real problem for somebody and probably should have won in the first place.
66,666 Daniel left a comment on our website.
My last 3 GUI-based apps I installed are Baobab, That's the disk usage analyzer, Minecraft, and Micropolis Java. So 2 out of 3, I would say Java is the superior development platform. Bonus points for Qt-based crypto wallets as well.
Nadrimastor left a comment on our website.
Take a good chunk of Mozilla's Servo, use WebAssembly as a bridge, and make it a language agnostic, and beat Electron at its own game.
We need more frameworks. That's what we need. Jason Smith left a comment on our website.
First of all, a shout out to Ubuntu Martin. Solid. The arguments against Electron and NWJS are similar to arguments against Java. They're too fat and non-native, but both are free and produce usable applications that work well on Windows, Mac and Linux. Moreover, with Electron I can target web and phone apps, called over, without duplication of effort. Electron is very compelling if I want to reach a broad audience without a huge development team and budget. On the dearth of new native applications, is there anyone out there organising efforts based on identified needs? If one wished to get involved with organised GNOME or KDE native desktop apps or other desktops, where would one get started?
Good question. If you know the answer, let us know.
Yeah, that is a good question, and please, answers on a postcard.
Or in Telegram.
That'll do.
Javier left a comment on our subreddit, which is r/Ubuntu podcast.
Here, in the Floss community, we tend to complain about what we don't have. We would like to use Photoshop, or we need the latest version of Adobe Reader to fill in a form. Sometimes we take so many great Floss tools for granted that we forget how difficult it would be if we were using just proprietary software. Could you try to work with your computers using just proprietary software? No open source and no GPL. What do you think? Would it be possible?
Impossible. Ninjaron left an essay on our subreddit.
This is an extract from said essay. I don't hate Electron, and I'm happy if people can have more of the applications that allow them to use the Linux desktop. That said, I don't prefer Electron apps, and I try to avoid them for my own use, and that has nothing to do with how they integrate with the desktop. I use a tiling window manager and a mix of GTK and Qt applications, as well as some applications with other toolkits.
Cool. Robert Orzana emailed us.
Is there a way to subscribe to the podcast by email to be notified of new episodes?
Ooh.
We've been asked this before, and the answer is no.
Could you use if this, then that?
Oh, you could. That's a good answer, Mark. I like that. Yeah, so there's a website, iftt.com.
Yeah.
And you
could
point it at our RSS and have it email you when that RSS updates.
Nice one. Javier, Fulmer Fresland, Thea Murphy and Bruce W. Fowler left comments on our Reddit, Google Plus and Facebook pages in reply to our posts about the 300th episode coming up soon. Javier said,
I think I read somewhere you were close to episode 300. Totally and utterly amazing work.
Fulmer said,
thanks for staying around. I enjoy listening to it.
Bruce commented,
still the best Linux podcast available, despite too much about Ubuntu and the absence of the Wing Commander.
And Thea said, after so many years, I can't imagine not having you guys in my podcast feed. You guys are awesome. Oh, that's very kind.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's the end of all your bumper feedback.
If you love the command line as much as we do, send us a command that will blow our minds, and we might even mention it on the show. Send your command line lurve to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
That's all for this episode. We'll be back next week.
Shut your face. That was intentional.
It was episode 20, by the way. We'll be back next week when we'll have more news, comment, and discussion. Do keep listening for our 300th episode coming up soon. We have a bumper extravaganza planned, which I think you'll all enjoy.
Yeah.
We also have a competition coming up soon, so
we do.
Stay tuned for that. Laptops to be won.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck...
I'm afraid
what?
couldn't understand that.
Perfect.
Brilliant.